We have a guest speaker, and the guest speaker that I want to turn it over to is somebody that I've known for quite a while. I think I've known 12, 13 years at the very least. Kevin was an undergraduate here at the University of Mary Washington, and I got to know Kevin actually through his then girlfriend. They're no longer dating because they're married, and I was there for that, which I was really pleased to be a part of. I was actually officiant at the wedding. I was excited to be invited for that. So just so you all know, I have some experience. If in the future you're looking for an officiant, I'm your guy, and I'll even have ChatGPT write up some really great vows for you. So Kevin was an undergraduate here in political science, and I didn't have him in class, but I did get to know him a little bit because his girlfriend Rachel was in my social media class, and she knew that he was thinking about and had applied for an internship at Facebook and completed that the summer after his junior year. And it was so successful that they invited him to come back after his graduation. They had a job waiting for him. And he had a really great experience there, and I was lucky enough to be listed as the sponsor or the supervisor. I didn't really do anything. I signed the forms and was really happy to hear some great stories from Kevin, and he was nice enough to bring back a couple of trinkets that I still have in my office, a Facebook pint glass, I think, and a book that he grabbed when he was there on campus. On the Facebook campus. I probably think that my favorite story, though, of Kevin from years ago is when he was still working at Facebook. And my dad and I were in California, and he was kind enough to give us a tour of Facebook. And so we went and visited the Facebook campus. It was pretty awesome. And at that time, I was really into social media, teaching the social media class. It was great to be there. I think we even walked by Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg at the time when we were walking through the open areas there. Probably the highlight of the whole thing, though, is that my rather elderly father then took the opportunity to ask Kevin to help him set up Facebook Messenger on his phone. It's like, Dad, we're not visiting Facebook so you can get tech support. But Kevin was kind enough to be very patient with my dad and help him out with that, which has been a great family story ever since. Kevin's done some really amazing work, and I'm excited that and really appreciative that he's here today to talk to you about some of that experience, taking a liberal arts education at Mary Washington and a background in political science and finding ways to be able to contribute in really important, meaningful, and unique ways to the tech industry. And so what he's planning on talking about today, and this is the title that we had on the website for the campus site for the course, Building the Digital Infrastructure for the Future, Why It Matters, and How to Build It Responsibly. And as we all know, this is certainly a controversial topic. The building of data centers around here is something that we're all aware of. We had a recent public debate about this. And there are a lot of concerns that we've discussed in class, as well as some questions about data center build out and what it means for data infrastructures in the future and how reliant the AI industry is upon data centers going forward. Kevin right now is working as a Senior Vice President of Public Affairs for STACK Infrastructure, one of the main companies that's working on those data center build-outs. And in fact, I hope he'll have a chance to tell us a little bit about one of the recent announcements where they're working with OpenAI to build one of these data center complexes, a giant one, in the Southwest. So Kevin has a wealth of experience, really has done some amazing things and represented UMW incredibly well. So please join me in welcoming Kevin to give us some discussion points and talk to us a bit about data centers. Yep.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Rao. Those Facebook trinkets are probably actually relics now. So hang on to those. I think in the digital age, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years are lifetimes. So that's vintage. So put that on the shelf and save it. So thank you all very much for letting me come today and speak with you on this topic. I think just to start, and I think Dr. Rao put it pretty well, my journey in this space actually started a long time ago. So it started in 2009. I was a freshman here at the University of Mary Washington. I was living in Jefferson, and commuting across campus to all the buildings, trying to get to my classes on time. I was making friends. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was meeting my then girlfriend, now wife. A lot of big moments happened on this campus, and one of the big moments in my life that happened was I got a call from a mutual friend in the spring of 2009 and asking if I wanted to come work in a data center in Ashburn, Virginia. Now, I grew up in Manassas, Virginia. I worked in restaurants, I worked in retail, I found any opportunity. I worked on a goat farm at one time. That was not a good time. Don't recommend it. Goats, some are cute, not my best friends. But I got this call, and I was in this situation where I needed to earn some money to continue to fund my education. This friend gave me a call, and they offered me this opportunity, and I said, I don't know what a data center is. I don't know the first thing about how to be helpful in this situation other than I'm ready to get to work, and I want to work as many hours as possible. And that ended up becoming an incredible opportunity for me, and I went and worked in a data center facility in Ashburn, Virginia. That became a 16-year career that has led me to where I am now. I spent 13 years of that working in data centers, technical program management, public policy, real estate, and global affairs at Facebook, now Meta, RIP, the Facebook brand. All of that seems kind of linear, seems kind of straightforward, as maybe there was some logic and thinking and strategy there, but really what it was a combination of having an interest in making money because I had to pay these tuition bills, understanding that hard work pays off, but then very, very importantly, the creative skill set, and I think as Dr. Rao likes to put it, durable skills that I built learning in a liberal arts university that gave me a surprising, unique strength relative to some of the highly specialized, highly technical individuals that were my peers coming into the company at the same time. And kind of that combination and a decent amount of luck really helped to kind of build my career to where it is today. And so I just say all that because for students currently, whether you're first year, fourth year, or like me, it took me 5 years, really important moments are happening every day in your lives right now, and they mean a lot to your future life. And so the fact that you have an incredible set of courses like this one, and great faculty, great teachers, great new buildings, great resources, I'm really optimistic for everybody kind of coming through here and planning their future careers. One thing that I'm very optimistic about right now, and that I think is fantastic about this program, is that it's inviting the conversation to not just be optimistic about artificial intelligence and technology of the future, but also be skeptical and raise questions, ask hard questions, and try to, there's this phrase that I really like, iron sharpens iron. The idea is like you got to kind of ask the hard questions as you pursue the good things too, and work through hard problems together, and you all sharpen and become stronger together. And I think that one thing that when I reflect on my career on like the social media side, there was a period of time where I was drinking the Kool-Aid. I was like, this is the best thing to ever help the planet. We had Arab Spring, which was a moment of social revolution and freedom that was really kind of enabled through the ability to have online platforms like a Facebook to communicate and to organize and to up-level conversations. You have these kind of watershed moments where you're like, we've done it. We really changed the world. But there was a lot of naivety in that thinking. A powerful tool for good can be a powerful tool for bad. And so how you use it, how you use tools is really important. And I think we can tell from, over the last 15 years, we've learned a lot on the social media side. There's a lot of hard impacts, negative impacts, in addition to, plenty of value. Clearly people use it a lot, and so there's something to it, but at the same time, there's a cost that comes with it. And so I think having the conversations earlier around artificial intelligence is really smart, and something I wish we had done earlier with, kind of that late 2000s, early 2010s digital revolution where, things changed in a significant way. Adoption of smartphones, social media, just incredible sophistication, ubiquitous access to, higher quality internet connections, ability to just do more digitally. So that brings us to these courses and this talk today, which is really looking at, I think, the conversations you've had to date, and you've had one debate on data centers, but which, great, love those. But you've had a lot of conversations about AI as an application, a utility, a service, a new technology that's emerging and being used in our lives. Well, like anything in the technology space, you've got kind of the soft layer, and then you got the hard layer. The hard layer is the infrastructure side. Some things in between, right? Devices and some other kind of specifics, but all of the utility and functionality and application of artificial intelligence requires infrastructure. So when I think about AI and its impacts, I got to think about what the applications may do from a positive perspective or negative perspective, but also think about, okay, to enable even having the opportunity to have the good or the bad out of that, what infrastructure is required to make it even function or work. So before we kind of jump into how my framework of thought around responsible development here, I'm generally curious, for the folks in this room, do you have who here feels like they kind of have a good understanding of how the internet works? Cool. Who is willing to describe how the internet works for me? Come on. You look like you were ready to describe it. No? Definitely no? Okay. I got a question. If you were to think of, the 3 most important things to make sure that you can connect to the internet every day, what would they be? And we need a volunteer for this one. Yes, sir.
Strong internet connection.
Okay, that's one. Any others? Data center. 2. Service. Cell service. Okay, I'm going to throw that into the network connectivity bucket. Device. Okay. All right, so this is a good list. We're starting to build the internet here, right? Devices, networks, so the service, the data center infrastructure that then stores data, processes data. You actually have, on that network service side, a tremendous amount of complexity that we don't even think about, just like how we turn the faucet on and it just works, turn the light switch on, electricity works. There are millions of miles of high-speed fiber optic cables that have nothing to do with connecting to your device at all. They just connect data centers to data centers, data centers to towers, data centers to internet exchanges, data centers to content distribution networks. There's this massive web of infrastructure that supports everything we do. And I can guarantee you that everybody in this room has used a data center today. I'm not going to do the thing where, raise your hand if you used your email today or checked your flight. That's like conference stuff. I can tell by the general room here and the number of laptops every single person here has used a data center today, probably multiple times, maybe hundreds of times, and maybe using it right now. So when you think about the internet and how it works and how it supports everything in our daily lives today, I've actually thought about this. I lived in Palo Alto, California for a while when I was at the Facebook thing. It's very trendy in the tech world to also be very anti-tech while you're also building tech. So it's we need a week of silence, no connectivity, go ground ourselves in the woods, go hiking, all these things. You try to find a way to actually have zero digital activity, even not just first order, but second order, third order digital activity. It's actually remarkably hard. What if you got to go buy a water bottle? It's hope they take quarters. So it is very hard to remove yourself from the fact that, the internet, the digital applications, everything that we do is supported in some way. And so whether, any activity you can think of. So when you think about that, and then you think about artificial intelligence, we think about artificial intelligence in the context of specific tools, applications, interfaces that we have. So whether I, want to use a a ChatGPT or a Claude, or I want to maybe use some kind of vibe coding tool, or I want to use some sort of content producing tool. We think about it very specifically there, but what we forget is that is only a portion of artificial intelligence application. The second and third order applications are vast, and I would actually say rather at individual user scale, potentially at just full utility scale. What I mean by that is, let's say I am the largest search engine in the world already, and I want to more effectively organize my data sets to be more efficient in my data storage, to then reduce my total infrastructure input, maybe reducing my operational expenses. You can use AI for that, right? And that's an activity that is completely under the surface. Nobody will ever see that. That's going to be run out of a couple of terminals in Mountain View, maybe, and we'll never know as consumers, but the demand for that AI activity could be extremely high, and then repurposed many times, reapplied to maybe areas like safety. If I'm a social media company and I am having this tremendous issue where I have to have content reviewed, horrific content that's put on my platform, and I don't want people to have to see that, maybe I could actually have an AI system evaluate first layer of content introduced, maybe 99.99% of the 3 billion pieces of content I have uploaded a day that could violate terms, that could be horrible, you don't want a person to see, could be handled by an AI system, and then very specific things have to have a human reviewer. Again, things that we would never see as consumers. You can also think about small businesses, large businesses. Almost everybody who builds a thing is looking for some opportunity to have artificial intelligence improve efficiency, effectiveness, customer experience, etc. So when you think about all that demand, it's not just those kind of first order interfaces, applications that we all use today. It's a huge swath of opportunity. So the reason I put all that context forward before I talk about digital infrastructure is just to set the table for the fact that I can tell you what I believe, which is this is fundamentally a high utility new technology that understanding on the application layer can be extremely good or potentially bad, but those are conversations, debates, policies, regulations, learnings that I think are worth having and being made. And so because of that, I feel very strongly in the fact that we need to build the digital infrastructure to support the opportunity to have that potential good and potential bad and all the conversations in between, and have brilliant minds like y'all's thinking about how to make sure we get the best value out of this with the least downside in the most equitable way, in the most ethical way, in the most valuable way for humanity. So that leaves me in the spot of, all right, we got to build the infrastructure. Well, we talked about how the internet is structured. I'm going to narrow it into a data center. Data centers are not monolithic. There are actually tons of different data centers. They're just kind of boring and nobody wants to talk about them and never really wanted to talk about them until they became a problem. I was actually, for a long period of time, spending a lot of time trying to get people interested in them. Very hard to do until their real concerns start to arise. And so when you look at a data center, they can be small, they can be large, but when you look at a data center for artificial intelligence and at that scale, they start to become a little more standardized. So I want to talk about those specifically. So at the end of the day, a data center is purely a result of the physical requirements to support the deployment of the GPUs, network and storage that allow for the training and inference for AI to function. When you put it that way, everything's driven really by the chipsets and the server designs for the chipsets. We then just build the buildings and all the infrastructure around that. So when you think about it that way, what does a chip need? It needs power, it needs connectivity, and it needs to stay cool. And it needs to probably be in close proximity to a lot of other chips, which, if we've got some architecture and engineering folks in the room, like that means it gets really heavy and your buildings need to be designed to handle, I'm sure a library was thought of differently with books full of shelves, like think of, racks full of computers. So really simply put, we are powering, cooling, connecting, and putting the roof over the head for these servers that are kind of, and not to make it sound a little too futuristic or creepy, but kind of the brains of AI. So maybe we're just the skull. I don't know, skull and body. So when you think about it that way, I start from a place of how much power is required to serve a very specific AI application from a data center perspective. And I have to think about it that way because at the end of the day, like I just said, I'm just here to support the ability for these chips to actually kind of function and support AI. And so that's kind of a weird way to think about physical building development, in my opinion, from purely a consumption of one resource as a driving resource. And that one's a really hard one because from a how much power perspective, I actually have very little control over the how much because that's entirely defined by the chip power requirements themselves, which are defined by the applications that we all require those chips for. So I'm kind of stuck with a number. Typically one large number that is a max capacity number and very different than a consumption number. So if I can't really control the how much, what I can control is the how it's served as best as I can, how it's paid for as best as I can, where it's consumed as best as I can. Those are the three things that I can do on the power side. And we're going to dive a little bit more into that in a minute. And by the way, I do want to leave time for questions. So if you just give me the signal when we've got like 10, yeah, then we can do questions then. So very simply, that's how I think about the power side. The building side, the kind of space piece, obviously they require a lot of land. Sometimes they need to be really close to people though. So I have to think creatively on how to both have the building in a place that has the land to be able to support the building that I need, but also be technically in proximity to where it needs to be. Now I love this narrative where it's like AI data centers, they can be anywhere. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm pretty sure just like that was like a crypto talking point where they're like, kind of want to sell these crypto data centers to AI and like kind of flip them that way. But it all depends. No software engineer wants to be told where their infrastructure is. They want to tell the infrastructure where it goes. So if they can't be in the middle of North Dakota and they need to actually be near people because the application that they're building benefits from close proximity to dense populations, like that's where they're going to go. So when it comes to building and land and thinking about where you put one of these large buildings, the best place to start is to ask where they should go. Every locality is different. Every state is different. Every community is different. The dynamics of real estate development in any given environment are like so complex and so challenging, and unless you grew up there, you should probably go talk to the people that are in leadership and in that community and say like, where would make sense for something like this that I'm describing? So when it comes to the power, I've got some kind of limited options that I can look through, but are very powerful and important. From the where, I've got a lot of optionality, but I need to be guided. And then for cooling, keeping the environment cool for the servers, this one's very fascinating because, look, we all use air conditioning, right? Makes sense. Climate control in a space is incredibly useful. But when it comes to keeping chips cool, obviously they generate a lot of heat. That power becomes something. Power becomes heat. So you need to be able to cool very effectively and very efficiently. And actually you want to cool with the least amount of resources as possible, because the less resources you use in cooling, the more resources you can use to power chips, which is better overall. So you have some pretty simple, like we'll call it two large buckets of technology designs that you can use when it comes to cooling a facility. One is more energy intensive. It's an air-cooled design that my mechanical engineers would just like slap me for oversimplifying it, but it's kind of like a little bit more like the AC unit at your house. Like that's not driving your water bill, that's driving your power bill, right? So you could have an air-cooled design. It has some technical limitations based on elevation, humidity, and availability of power. And then second bucket of design that you use is an evaporative cooling system, which is very similar to, actually this is a little story here. In 2008, there was a guy at Facebook who, and he totally made this story up, I'm pretty sure. But he told everybody, but he's like, I came up with this brilliant new design to cool data centers. And he drew it on a napkin in a diner while talking to one of the people that worked for him. They framed that napkin. And he drew a swamp cooler, which is just air flowing through a wet towel to cool down the air so that then you can kind of simulate you can remove heat from that air by having that transfer to the water. And that can cool the air down, and people do this in swamps and hot, arid areas where they don't have AC. That's kind of what gave the rise to this massive use of evaporative cooling, which is water is more conductive for removing heat than air is. And so if we can use water to pass hot air through, we can reduce the temperature of that air and cool these servers without using very much electricity. So when I think about those two buckets of types of cooling, from a responsible development perspective, it's very important to understand where you're going. Where are you putting these facilities and what resources are more or not available? You probably want to not use the more water-intensive cooling system in an area that doesn't have a lot of water, and you probably want to use or not use the air-cooled system in an area where the elevation makes it ineffective. You can kind of start to hone and narrow your site selection based off of this thinking. And then also choose your designs potentially, if you have flexibility to choose designs based off of those kind of narrowing factors. So the last piece that I'll add is the connecting part. We power these things, we house these things, we cool these things, and we connect these things. The connectivity piece, it's kind of funny because it's kind of fallen out of the conversation. It's not talked about as much, but this is a huge challenge. When you have the amplification or multiplication of data requirements, when you think of artificial intelligence versus maybe, let's say, traditional cloud computing, that saturates your fiber optic networks, which we don't have to overly dive into this, but it's both the most technical thing I've ever encountered and the most simple thing I've ever encountered. You have glass that has light going over it. That the light is split into wavelengths. The wavelengths are then split even further, and that is then used through very rapid transmission signals to carry zeros and ones at the near speed of light to transfer massive amounts of data in incredibly short periods of time over very long distances. It is modern day magic. And the interesting thing is more capacity and speed oftentimes comes down to reduction of bit error rate, which means cleaner glass. So Corning, if you have Corningware in your house, Corning makes incredible glass for fiber. But we have a network connectivity issue because the sheer scale and need of more fiber optics to connect all these facilities, not just to each other, but to people, are huge. And that's a lot of miles to go. That's a lot of line to run. And it's not just, most of the time it's not overhead, which is actually fast and cheap. A lot of times it's underground. It's so important you can't get that cut. And it's not always just underground. A lot of it is actually run subsea. You have to connect continents. Continents need to connect to each other. Sometimes in the same country or even the same state, you need to connect via waterways. It's really fascinating stuff. But so that network piece is actually huge, and I think a underappreciated challenge. But I will say from a responsible perspective, the way that I think about it is if you're going to spend a lot of money to build a lot of fiber infrastructure to connect some really big buildings, build a little extra. put in some extra conduit, which is just empty kind of tubes that you can pull more fiber through in the future. Not just for future expansions, so you have to like kind of spend the money again, disturb the earth again, but actually so you can maybe make it available for residential uses, public uses. That was something that we did when I was at Meta. That was incredibly successful and just a great way of thinking about how to, they call it dig once. I feel like that has a lot of political connotation around it now, but the idea of like just be smart about when you're going to deploy this fiber. So those are my 4 main areas of consideration around responsible development, but let me just like run through this again very, very quickly. When it comes to power, you have to think about where's the right place to draw the power. How can you support the deployment of new generation that makes the most sense as you add on demand to the grid? How can you ensure that you're paying your full cost of service, which is a surefire way to protect other ratepayers from your costs? How can you be engaged with regulators and policymakers and community partners to build the generation infrastructure where it needs to go? Sometimes you have zero control. Most of the time you have zero control over that, by the way. That's normally a utility. But also be thoughtful about maybe how the distribution infrastructure that connects your facility comes in. But a lot of it, all on the power side, all kind of draws back to partnership and engagement with utilities and regulators, and then also kind of understanding through pre-research where the right place to go is to deploy this in the most efficient, effective way. I'm already going to build the most efficient building. My customer's already going to use the most efficient possible chipset. I can tweak those knobs as best as possible, but like that's actually just dollars and cents that drives that, not even just how do we do this better. So when it comes to power, it's really about how you get the power and where you get the power from and how new power infrastructure is being built and how all that's being paid for. On the physical space side, I mean, to me, fundamentally, it is about you engage with the communities and leadership in communities, land use, typically your elected officials, economic development, planning and zoning, local third-party advocacy groups, understand where it would make the most sense to put one of these if it's even wanted. And then on the water side, or on the cooling side, apologies, if you have an abundance of water resources available, it is the more efficient cooling technology to use from a power resource perspective. If you have limited water resources available, probably best to use the waterless cooling technology. And then on the network side, when you're building a new network, always think to overbuild it. That's good for communities, it's good for people, it's also good for just kind of future development. And those are really all the primary recipes that go into building a data center. There's about actually 1,000 more detailed ones. You go across supply chains and things like that, but those are the core ones. And before I move to questions, am I getting close? A couple more? Perfect, because I got one more point to make. So when we think about local development, because now I'm going to use my example and I'm going to get to Project Jupiter here. First and foremost, this industry is not old. Okay, we're talking about a new, this is how I describe it, a new real estate asset class, data centers, that the very earliest versions came around in like real versions of it came around in the 90s. We own the original AOL hyperscale data center that was built in 1997, going 28 years strong. It's got another 28 years in it. Those buildings are so different than what we build today, but between 1997 and 2025, this has changed so significantly and so quickly. It's new. It's new. And so we're learning a lot as we go. And so how do we apply our learnings rapidly and get ahead with our learnings to make the best decisions possible? Because basically the world is looking at us saying, hey, we need this digital infrastructure to support these applications. Go do it and do it fast. And it's like, yeah, but we also got to do it right. So from my perspective, when I think about this in my real examples here, when I think about in the Fredericksburg area, my company's part of the Stafford Technology Campus, which is on Route 1. This is a large data center campus When we first announced it, it was one of the largest in the world. 1 year later, doesn't look so big anymore. But when we built that campus, one of the things that we specifically did was look at how we could partner with our customer to build a reclaimed water system, which I thought was incredibly novel. Now, listen, I live here. To me, our waterways are kind of the lifeblood of the area and just our history, too. And part of that history is using that water to enable everything that we have here. There's a reason why the city of Fredericksburg is here, because of the river. And that was, from everything from trade and transportation to manufacturing, textiles. And so, that the river has always been a part of our story here. But for me, when thinking about this and just hearing from the community, and I spent a lot of time talking to our river stewards around here, one of the big things that they noted was they were like, listen, we need to figure out a way on how to support cooling for this. You, as in me, need to figure out a way to support cooling for this facility without drawing from the river. And fortunately, there is, in some water distressed parts of the world, and specifically in the Southwest in the United States, actually very first time in Irvine, California, they started to experiment using treated wastewater for non-potable purposes. We use a lot of potable water for a lot of things that don't require potable water, just like generally, right? Like irrigation. How do we take this water that's already been used, that's already been treated, it's clean enough to dump back into waterways, but not clean enough to drink, and give it another use, recycle it. And so they figured this out in Irvine, California a long time ago. It's deployed in the Southwest. It's in Phoenix, Arizona. And that's what we're building for the site in Stafford. So that's using all treated wastewater, which if you ever go to a wastewater treatment facility, it's pretty gross and also kind of cool, but it's mainly gross. But that's like a great way to give second life to a resource and use it again, which to me, it's reduce, it's reuse, it's recycle. Here I'm reusing and recycling heavily. So that was one good example recently of just like kind of how we thought about how to deploy new technology to reduce our resource uses and still enable large infrastructure. But I'm going to just talk about Project Jupiter. Then I'm going to turn it over for questions. So Project Jupiter, if you're not familiar, is a large AI data center campus in Doña Ana County, New Mexico, that STACK Infrastructure announced is it is the developer, owner, operator for, and it is to support OpenAI and Oracle's Stargate project. As we all know, this was announced, the Stargate project earlier this year, probably part of your debates, was this huge, ambitious announcement back in January. And my first thought when I saw it was, that's crazy. Still is a little kind of crazy, but like in one of those ambitious, shoot for the moon, fall amongst the stars types of situations. Well, we were fortunate enough to win a project and participate in a part of the Stargate program. And the way we did it in New Mexico is, I think, an example of a lot of the things that I described and when it comes to thinking through development. So first, New Mexico earlier this year passed a piece of legislation that enabled the creation of microgrids, with a requirement to also, when you build a microgrid, you also have to stay compliant with their Energy Transition Act. This was a tremendously bipartisan piece of legislation seeking to enable new generation to be built and to attract new industrial use in New Mexico. So our project is using this microgrid legislation and working within the bounds of the regulatory scheme that the state set up. And that was fundamental to attracting this project. And I think that is a good example of doing a couple things. One, paying our full cost of service, now isolated and not impacting other ratepayers, while also utilizing policy that the state specifically designed to and laid the pathway forward to say, this is how we want you to do it, and doing it the way that they want us to do it. In addition to using a microgrid, we are also using a fully closed loop system for cooling. So what this means is there's no recurring use of water for operations in that facility. When it comes to day-to-day operation, once this site is live, it will have the same water requirement as a 750-person office building, which is a pretty small office building. Lastly, what we did was work with the community specifically. We're in the middle of nowhere, so we're not near anything. We're not, impacting residential or anything like that. But it was still really important. We're near a community called Sunland Park that has some serious existing access to clean water issues. The water that they have today has had real issues to public health. And so as a result of this project in partnership with the county and the state, there's a significant revenue share that is going specifically to Sunland Park to rebuild their water infrastructure so that they have clean drinking water. Which is what people there care the absolute most about. So to me, it's kind of an example of like applying these responsible development principles, in the best way possible to build very big infrastructure that's necessary to support all of the AI applications that we're looking to use today. So with that, I'd love to open it up for some questions.
And let me ask one starter question, then I'll start over here, and we'll let it open it up for anybody else that has questions. One thing that I really have admired about your story with all of this is that when you were an undergraduate, it's not like in political science you took a class on managing public affairs for data centers. There was nothing like that, right? And so you obviously moved into a field that's new. There's no training available for that specifically. What advice would you give for students that are being told, hey, a lot of the jobs you're preparing for, we can't really prepare you for you because they're going to be different or they're going to be new? How do they prepare for it? You did that. How did you go about doing it, and what advice would you give for students to be able to do the same thing?
So I would say two biggest things. One is, regardless of discipline, communication is incredibly valuable. You can actually be pretty good at most things at an entry level if you just know how to communicate without hardly even understanding it. Like, I can tell you right now at an organizational level, sometimes all I need from entry-level workers is people who can just take notes, clearly articulate summaries, provide clean communications, do it on a regular schedule. And by the way, I'm happy if they learn through the process of that, but the value is huge. So communication and ability to communicate is fundamental to almost any discipline, even one where you're like, I never work with another human being. You will. So that's one tip. Just always hone that. You'll be good for most gigs. And then the second piece is really truly emphasizing learn how to learn, not just learn things, right? So like how you consume a new topic, learn the fundamentals of it, are incredibly valuable to a fast-changing work environment where, I certainly, almost everything I spoke about here today, I knew zero of as a result of my education. That's not because my education failed me. It's actually because my education enabled me to learn how to learn these things so I can now do what I do. So I would say learn how to learn.
Thank you. My question is primarily on your role in a public affairs office rather than the actual technical. But I feel like a lot of public discourse and even now reporting in legacy media is focused on the negativity of data centers. And so I'm curious how your office manages those narratives, and is the negativity something that you all seek to contain, or is it more so all press is good press?
Yeah, so great question. I mean, first, I think I'll actually say it's kind of funny. So like my company did not have this role 3 years ago. And they brought me in because I had worked with a few folks at my previous career, and I got a call where it was, hey, we think we need your skills and expertise for our company. And I was like, you don't have that already? And they're like, no, like we need to have somebody who can work with our public stakeholders, public partners, because it's kind of the narrative's getting a little bit rough out here. And I was like, okay. And so that kind of started the conversation. So, I have a lot of technical background, but it's kind of hard to be in my role without having an understanding of the business you're communicating about. And so, I love the technical space. I think I love almost as much of it, the ability to talk about it. And so, my role, my employees, my world, we're not technical. And that's okay. But we need to be technical enough to be able to work with our technical teams so that we kind of understand their needs. To your point on the press side, no, negative press from a business perspective with a legitimate business is bad. I'm always going to start there. There are some people, if my product is fame, then maybe there's no such thing as bad press. But my reputation and my company's reputation is important to our product and our ability to, not just our product in terms of with our customers, but actually our product in terms of working with our communities. I would rather show up into a conversation with a community about a proposed project and not have the baggage of a whole bunch of like bad narratives to have to first kind of sort through. So to that point, this is actually just a fascinating and unique challenge set for the public affairs, but also communication space on this front. Because data centers are kind of generally perceived as like same. The actions of one company reflect on all companies. So you have this very challenging scenario where I will focus on what I can control, which is how can my company do its job the best way. And by the way, we're not always going to get it perfect, but I'll do it the best way that I possibly can. And then like some joker upstart over here does the absolute worst thing possible, and then now I'm going to wear that. So it's a good question. It's a hard one to kind of navigate, but I would prefer that we work through the narrative rather than just kind of accept the bad.
We have time for one last quick question.
I see some backpacks ready to go.
I kind of just want to ask that again because
Yeah.
you kind of skated around the actual problem, which is AI data centers are terrible for the environment. And I feel like we have a morality and a responsibility to talk about that and know about that. So when you're talking about how you think it's worth it to go through all this trial and error to find out what AI can really do for us, do you think it's worth the toll that's having on the environment to learn about all that?
So here's how I genuinely think about it, and I'm not skating around it. What I'm doing is, I would say, describing the framework with how I think through the environmental impacts, which the environmental impacts are generally derived through power and water resource usage. There are others, by the way. I mean, you got to think about it. Just like our phones and tablets require manufacturing and processing, and the soup to nuts of that are complex and have environmental impacts. I have to think about the primary ones that what I develop can cause. And so when I think about it, I think about how do I reduce the total amount of resources required. So reduce. And then I think about how to deploy them in the most effective way possible to get the most utility out of it from an AI perspective. So I do disagree with a blanket statement of this is bad for this. I would say this. Most activity, regardless of activity, requires resources. How you use those resources and your stewardship of those resources are paramount. And so I would focus on that conversation rather than just saying, donuts are bad for the environment, right? So I think that it's important instead to have the conversation of how we use these things responsibly rather than just try to focus on what's good, what's bad.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks, Kevin.